Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride, let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/168, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call the voicemail hotline, 202-930-1109, and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 168th edition of the Pedalshift Project. I am Tim Mooney. You are listening to me in Portland, Oregon. No, actually, I'm in Portland, Oregon. You're listening to me wherever you are. You may be in Portland, but it's very exciting. I'm here for about a week or so. I'm going to be doing a few things. Of course, I've mentioned the Pedalpalooza Ride. I'll be mentioning that again because it's, as you're listening to this, if you download the show immediately when it comes out, which, let's face it, if you subscribe, you should get it. The ride is tomorrow. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. I'm also going to be doing a little bit of a coastal ride as well, as I wanted to do when I am out here. So we'll talk all about that in a moment. Wanted to mention at the top of the show, of course, if you are a Pedalshift Society person, you are going to be getting the last of the DC to Cincinnati bonus pods. That is a companion to this, the part 4 of the Ohio to Erie Trail south portion of the DC to Cincinnati ride. But I also would encourage you to stick with that bonus feed for at least a few more weeks or another week or whatever, because of that Oregon coast ride. I'm going to record some audio. Whether or not it ends up making the show, unclear at this point. It's sort of going to depend on how things go. It's only going to be a couple of days of riding, but a little bit on the more aggressive side of things because I am intending to get down to Newport pretty quickly. And of course, all of the details will be there in the bonus feed. So again, Pedalshift Society folks, look in your feed. You're going to be getting a bonus episode that's a part of this episode and some bonus content for the Oregon ride. If you're interested in bonus content like this, so more podcasts from me on bike touring, join the Pedalshift Society. That is pedalshift.net/society. It's $1, $2, $5 a month, or even one-shot support. Go check it all out there. As I mentioned, I am in the land of sunshine and bunnies, Portland, Oregon. If you are in Portland on Friday, June 14th, join me and a slew of other folks for Pedalpalooza. It's going to be starting around 5:30 p.m. Details on where to meet and all of that is at pedalshift.net/events. There's also a Facebook event for it as well, so you can search on Facebook. Just go into the little search box there and type in Pedalpalooza and it should pop up. We got Sprocket Podcast, Joyride, Go Dig a Hole, and more of your favorite shows, ripping bikes with mics. And we're going to be meeting up at the Airstream studio, talking a little bit about the nuts and bolts of podcasting, and we're going to be doing some interviews along the way as we ride, making a few fun stops around the Portland metropolitan area. Well, I think we'll still stick in the city. We're going to end up over at the Beer Mongers at Southeast Division and 12th. Should be a fun ride. Come out and join us on Friday, June 14th, beginning around 5:30 p.m. Next week on the pod, there will be a podcast of some type from that ride. I don't know what it's going to look and feel like, but I'm hoping for, at least on the Pedalshift side of things, that it will be some interviews with folks who are there and talking about their experiences with bicycle touring as well. So take a gander at that next week for the 169th edition of the Pedalshift Project. The following week, number 170, is going to be the wrap-up show for the DC to Cincinnati ride, which is my kind of typical thing where it's all the takeaways and things that I learned for the entire ride. And I've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about with that. But first, let's get cracking on the completion of the ride. This is part 4 of the series. Again, go back and listen to the other 3 parts if you haven't already. The first part, of course, was the C&O. The second part was the Gap, the Great Allegheny Passage. Last week's episode number 167 was the Ohio to Erie Trail North. This is part 4, the Ohio to Erie Trail South. May the 12th day of this fine adventure, and we are getting close to the end. It's kind of crazy. This is from, London, Ohio, and it is a cold and drizzly London, Ohio today. You'll forgive me as I do this while I raise my tent. We started off relatively early. as all my days tend to. I think I say that every day. But yes, early mornings are the way I roll. And I have to say that riding was fast and good, and it was partially because I did something that I very rarely do, and that is I rode with people all the way here, which was unusual for me, but so fun and so great because folks who lived in Columbus, who showed me parts of Columbus, all on the route, we didn't really deviate all that much, but ended up having a really good hang. It was sort of like the meetup that I didn't want to specifically schedule because I'd be worried that I wouldn't be able to get there in time. Ended up having effectively a pretty great meetup. Let me start off at the beginning of the day. I woke up early before the sun came up because that's what I do, which is unfortunate. I had a croissant that was part of my stay and a cup of coffee, and that was really kind of a nice way to get started. And I left a little later than maybe I ordinarily would have, but it was largely because I didn't have to. It was kind of a relatively gray day, and it was a cold day, and it was starting off a little damp, although it wasn't raining yet. So I started down, and instead of taking the prescribed Ohio to Erie Trail route, which many folks have said to me, oh, well, it's very confusing and the turn-by-turns are really difficult. What I instead did was I took a look at the larger Columbus map. And if you look at that in Google Maps and have the bicycle routes turned on, oh man, Columbus has a ton of freaking bike trails and bike lanes. And so for where I was, just inside the border of Columbus on the north side, really north central side, I had tons of different options to come down through the city. I looked at it, and there's the Olentangy Trail, which goes along the Olentangy River. And that is a main north-south bicycle freeway, frankly, that looked really good to me from where I was. So that was sort of my plan. Got in touch with Doug and Michelle, and Doug is a listener and his wife Michelle, and they graciously said, hey, let's go riding. I also had been in touch with Chris Barron, who has been a supporter of the show forever, and if you are a Sprocket podcast listener, a supporter of that show as well. So I had all these folks that were willing to come out and say, hey, I'll show you around, which was really great. Now, both of them lived in different parts of town. So what I ended up doing was I ended up meeting up with Doug and with Michelle early, but not before I ran across something that made my morning very early on, and that was a Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is a donut shop that was originally only in Canada, and in my life it was a very special thing because it meant A, we were in Canada, and B, going to my grandparents' house in Michigan because we would go through Canada to do that. So I always felt like it was a real special treat to get that. So I pulled right over and got a cup of coffee and a 10-pack of Timbits that I thought would last me for the day. It lasted me about 37 seconds. So that worked out really, really well. Then I ended up meeting Doug and Michelle, and that was just so much fun because after we got around the whole notion of the meetup, because I screwed up. Well, I think it wasn't, I guess I kind of screwed up, but we didn't tell each other sort of exactly where we were coming from specifically. So they ended up further north than me by a couple of miles, but they just motored it right down and met me where I was at, and it ended up being really cool. And so they were like, yeah, we'll go most of the way with you. And they were trying to get some miles in or ride themselves. Turns out they ended up coming the whole way with me. So we ride down south to Ohio Stadium, which is where the Ohio State Buckeyes main football stadium is. Huge stadium if you're not familiar with it. And a really kind of ornate, beautiful entrance, which I did not realize existed. My family is a Michigan family. It's sort of like, you know how I am? Syracuse and Georgetown. Ohio State and Michigan football is sort of like that on steroids. So taking a picture and sending that off, I'm sure my brother will have something to say. But anyways, I'm digressing on sports ball here. So from that point, that's when Chris got in touch, and he was like, hey, when you're coming out on the west side, let me know and I'll meet up. And he was going to bring his son as well. And so we figured out a donut shop called Amy's Donuts, which was a perfect location because it was on the way and it was reasonable for where Chris is coming from his home. And so we ended up there, and what just a crazy, cool, delightful place. And yes, all I ate basically in the first half of the day was donuts, which is not my norm. But there was one that was shaped like a pig and colored like a pig. And I think I've mentioned the Pigs and Pugs Project is a nonprofit that my girlfriend and I are on the board of and run. And so I immediately took a picture of that, and because it is Mother's Day, that really made Kimberly's day as one of the early Happy Mother's Day little mini presents that I sent her. I sent her flowers too, don't worry, folks. So that went really, really well, and Chris eventually got there maybe a little bit after us, and we just had a fun time. His kid was super funny and like hopped up on sugar the whole time. It was just a lot of fun to kind of hang out, and we just talked bikes the whole time, bike touring, and all of them have like really interesting and varied experiences doing all sorts of different outdoor adventures. And what I really appreciated a lot between them all was just how many good stories and how great the infrastructure is here in central Ohio. You know, Columbus is really centrally located to everything. You go 5 hours in any direction and you're in some pretty cool places, so the options just abound. Yeah, we had a great time there and enjoyed maybe a few too many donuts, I think. And I literally was staring at a donut saying, I'm not going to eat that because I can't eat any more donuts, which I don't think I've ever said in my life, when I'm eating sugar, of course. So eventually we were like, okay, well, let's keep rolling in. We went to this beautiful park. I wish I could remember the name of it. And so many of these things like sort of go in and out of my brain because the fun part about today for me was I was able to let other people take the lead a little bit and just ride and talk and enjoy. This was the longest I've gone in 12 days without earbuds in my ears. So that was kind of a nice change of pace. So we end up going through that park, and that's where Chris said his farewells. Oh, I forgot to mention at the donut shop, we left a message for the Sprocket podcast, which may or may not make the air, but it was kind of fun to be able to do that. And anyways, that's where we said farewell to Chris. And Chris, thanks so much for showing up. It was so fun to meet you, and appreciate all you do for the show, and thanks for listening. After that, the idea was that they would go only so far as this point, probably midway down. And when all was said and done, they ended up coming all the way to London. So that's 40 miles from Columbus, and they needed to turn around, and it would be about 25 to 30 miles back. Within maybe a mile of getting to the town of London, it started to rain. And it had been pretty chilly for the day, and we had been making really good time. I think ultimately, we were averaging probably about 12 and a half miles per hour, which, although most of it was paved trail, that's pretty fast for me. And we didn't stop very much at all because we were just talking away and everything, and it worked out really, really well. So we made great time. But when that rain came down, boy, all of a sudden the temperatures really felt that much colder. So we get to the edge of town, and I sort of finagle with the Google Maps because they knew where they were going, but at the same time, it's just good to confirm how that was happening. Get to town, it was sort of like KFC or McDonald's. That was sort of the idea, and everybody was like, whatever. I'm like, okay, KFC, it's closer. So we ended up going there and warmed up, got some food in us, and that just made a huge, huge difference for all of us. And knowing that they had to turn around and go back, a couple of hours worth of riding back. But the cool thing is that they were big troopers about this. They're like, they were in the Gap Trail a day behind me earlier last week, which was kind of fun and cool to kind of compare notes on how things went for them versus how it went for me. So they're used to dealing with this. It was such a fun, delightful day. Totally different change of pace. I'm used to being in my own head, sharing the ride with all of you through this mechanism, but it was so nice to be able to meet people who listen to the show who are like sort of similarly minded, and I just really thought today was a great gift. Thank you to everyone who showed up. Really, really, truly appreciated. I am right now underneath a picnic shelter that the town of London has set up, and the Friends of Madison County Parks and Trails, they at least do some maintenance here. I don't know who it was I was talking to, whether it was the police department. It was a very friendly person at the other end of the line, and she was just like, here's the code for the bathroom and all that, and have a great night and blah, blah, blah. It was just really so nice to have that kind of a check-in. And there's tons of, I'm looking here, different brochures from the Ohio to Erie Trail to the London Cyclist Guide to, it looks like a map of the Miami Valley bikeways, which I might take a look at and possibly take with me. So lots of really great stuff. Central Ohio is a wonderful place to include in a bike tour. What a just huge amount of trails and pathways and all sorts of stuff. Really, really solid and good. So don't have a bad thing to say about it, except for maybe it'd be nice if it was a little warmer, maybe. The camp setup is really good. As I mentioned, I should give a little bit more of an overview. So they have decking, wood platforms for you to pitch your tent if you want. I asked and was told yes, I could pitch underneath the shelter here since it was raining and the likelihood of anybody else coming was really low. You could put up dozens of tents here very easily. They've got water. They've got I see a bike stand. They've got places to lock your bikes, the bike-shaped bike racks, which is always fun and cool. I could have sworn I saw, because we ran into those bike repair stations elsewhere on the trail down here, but I don't see one here. I mean, that's actually a surprise because it is such a really, really nicely set up park, and it is set up like a park too. So lots of great amenities, and it's all free. Of course, you've got the town right over here, so I'm sure that the town and the county know that they're going to get some good economic development out of having this kind of an amenity here. This is the type of thing that I think more towns along these types of trails should, in my opinion, consider doing, because I think that they get so many benefits out of bicycle tourists and bike packers and whatnot. Folks who are going to come here, and if this wasn't here, would I have stopped and gotten a bite to eat? Would I have made London my planned stop? Maybe not. So I think that this is the type of thing that can be a really good boon to trail towns that are out there. So there's my little bit of advocacy there right now. I am at the end of the trip here, and imminently about to join that vaunted 326 club for the Ohio to Erie Trail. And I have to say, I think I mentioned this a little bit, or at least alluded to it on a past entry here of the journal. But after about a week and a half, you sort of feel like you don't need to stop and you don't want to stop, but at the same time, maybe you're a little pulled back towards home. If you've got family or friends or loved ones, etc., they're back home. And I'm definitely feeling that push-pull that's happening right now. It would be really cool to be able to continue going, but you know what? This is what I booked, and this is the trip that I planned. This was the tour. So, I'm just going to enjoy the next 2 days and not mourn the loss of what could have been. This is exactly the tour that I wanted. And considering, and I don't want to taunt the bike touring gods, because why would I do that with 2 days left and a million things that could potentially go wrong between here and Cincinnati? It feels like I've really had largely good weather. I have very few complaints. The bike has handled well. Basically, I'm cursing myself this whole time. So everybody, if you hear in a couple of episodes, remind me of this. Anyways, it's been a great ride. I'm looking forward to the next couple of days, shorter days, but I think just as exciting, the Little Miami Trail and some other to get me to Cincinnati. So that is it for day 12. I will see you on Lucky 13 tomorrow. What could possibly go wrong on day 13 of a bike tour? May 13th, and I am in... Where am I? Spring Valley, Ohio. You would think that I would be at least moderately prepared when I start these things to say where I am, but sometimes I just don't know. I am in Spring Valley, Ohio, and it is the 13th, the penultimate day of riding on this great adventure from DC to Cincinnati. I am very much within a stone's throw of Cincinnati. I'm maybe about 20 miles away from camp, 25, give or take, and it's been interesting riding today. I will get to all of that as well. Had a lot of fun in parts and suboptimal conditions in other parts. So let's talk about it. Last night I streamed Game of Thrones after checking my data allowance because I was all set to go to Wi-Fi and decided against that because it was raining and cold and miserable and I didn't want to leave my tent. So after seeing that I had several gigabytes left in my allowance, I knew it was going to take about a gig and a half. Yes, a full gig and a half. They don't stream it at low quality, even on a phone. I watched it live pretty much and I went to sleep almost immediately afterwards. It was yet another cold night. I mean, I'll tell you, I am very fortunate that I am a bit of a Boy Scout when it comes to... I was a terrible Boy Scout, by the way, but I was good enough to be prepared, as they say, and I have had just enough layers to get me through all of these nights. And about a 4 a.m. wake-up this time, where it was like, oh, it's chilly. I think I did a better job last night of, instead of stretching out the tarp, I let it just sort of fall on it, so it's kind of sealed things up, and I think it kept the tent interior a little bit warmer. I did that because I was underneath the picket canopy, so I would stay dry. And of course, it was raining like crazy last night, and that was not forecast at all. It was a really, really, shall I say, shitty night? It was a shitty night weather-wise. But added a few layers around 4 a.m., and I slept just fine until 7, which is sleeping in for me, to be quite honest. The rain was steadily spitting, as we say in Oregon, and I was very happy that I set up in that shelter. The cold wind kept the tent bone dry. It's drier than it's been in days because of the fact that I was underneath the canopy, and there was this constant bit of wind. I just dried it right out, which was kind of nice. I made a run to the border, as they say, and I got some veggie egg wraps and some hash browns, and I downloaded some more podcasts first thing in the morning. Yesterday, one of the guys that I rode with, Doug, who I mentioned before, he had said that the portion of the trail that I was about to be riding is a lot of very open farmlands, and he said, you might hit some headwinds. Well, he was totally right on. Not only did I get a bunch of headwinds, which started off from being not bad to being kind of as bad as I've had on this whole trip. There was that combination with the drizzle, and I'll tell you what, I'm really glad I had my layers on, because it was as probably cold and damp as I've been riding since the tour that I did, the tour, I put that in quotes, the 1 day worth of riding that I did on the Gap last fall. The temperatures were a touch warmer, so it was fine. And as long as I was riding, it was fine. But boy, it got cold in there for a little while. Once you're riding, you stay nice and warm. My legs were starting to get a little bit cold whenever I stopped. And then, I would just have to kind of do some jumping around to get things going. Not a huge deal, but certainly not the summer tour that I usually kind of am looking forward to. This has definitely been kind of a more spring, if not wintry kind of riding for me. The rain is just about starting to clear up now as I'm standing here. You can hear the birds chirping and whatnot. And I really enjoyed Xenia. That was a lunch stop. But before that, I ended up meeting up with Billy Crafton. And it was great riding. We were chatting up a storm. It was cold, as I mentioned. I think I've mentioned that a few times now. And we went to Xenia. We grabbed the lunch, and we got Chinese, and he treated, which was super appreciated and really nice of him. And, like I said, we talked bikes, we talked adventures, and we might get a chance to hang again tomorrow in Cincinnati if his schedule works out, because he's up in kind of the Dayton area. Or Dayton. They don't call it Dayton-y. That just is me being weird. Okay, anyways, you can tell I've been on a bike for 13 days. And I'm a little bit loopy right now. But all is good. Client's been having a problem with a website, so I have been trying to help out with that from my phone, and there's only so much I can do. So I feel a little bit badly, because it's something that I know I could fix if I was at home. I may be able to completely fix it if I can get a little more information from them when I get my Wi-Fi. But it's just interesting. Like I've largely been able to do just a handful of things for clients that they've needed, but this is one where it's sort of like a little more 911-y for them. I would like to be able to fully help them out, but I don't have the capability. I have the capability, but not the information. I need a little bit of information to be able to kind of affect that fix, but hopefully I'll be able to do that for them later tonight. I only have a few miles to go, a couple hours, I should say. It's not just a few miles, a couple of hours of riding. Probably Wi-Fi, but we're not sure. And it's supposed to be quite good. And it's a very short ride in Cincinnati. It's one of the closest possible camping options that isn't a stealth camp going in. Because tomorrow would be day 3 without a shower, I've decided that I'm not going to stealth camp. I am going to fork over the $30 or whatever they're going to be asking for a tent camp. But maybe they'll take pity on me. The guy who's about ready to cross the finish line and give me like 5% off or something. I guess we'll see. I do want to mention the place. We went to a bar here in Spring Valley, and when they heard that I had biked basically from DC to get to here, they comped our coffees, which was just super nice of them. And it was, me and my coffee. I have no problem saying if coffee is bad. This was just like regular old brewed up coffee, but it tasted damn good, and they comped it. Go to the bar in Spring Valley and and tell them Tim sent you. From Kings Mills, Ohio, it is the end of day 13, the penultimate day. I originally planning on going to a campground, and it turned out it was a very nice campground, but it was also very quiet and closed down.
the location was really nice. It was beautiful right on the river, but ultimately I was feeling still a little antsy and wanted to put in some more miles. So I went ahead thinking, okay, I could go to the next town and eat dinner and then kind of figure it out from there. So I had some leftovers from lunch in the next town and considered briefly doing a wild camp on the outskirts of that town. And there were plenty of really good spots. In fact, I actually even pulled off the trail at one point because I was all set to do it because it was quiet. It was like maybe 6 o'clock. So it would have been an appropriate time to start pulling the tent together and everything like that. But ultimately I was sort of like, it was starting to get cold again. And I've been cold, it feels like, for the last 2 days. And, I thought, well, I was going to spend $30 on that campground and then decided the better of it. And so I started looking around to see if there were any Airbnbs or hotel options that were in that range and found one where I'm at right now and decided, you know what, why don't we just do a hotel and have a really good night's sleep and sleep in. Again, it's another value proposition, right? For, just a few bucks more than what I was going to be spending on the campground that I decided to say no to. I can have a better situation. And it ended up working out. I will have to say I had to climb up out of the river valley to get up to the hotel, though. So that was a bit more strenuous riding than I anticipated. But I think tomorrow morning will be awesome because I'm just going to glide right down back to the trailhead. And I've got basically 30 miles of riding. So I think I did 65 miles today. It certainly didn't feel like it. It was really just really good, gentle riding and a little bit of a downhill grade the whole way. Except, of course, for the big hill that I had to do to get up here to this area. Kind of right on the very edge of the Cincinnati area, I-71 maybe. I mean, don't quote me on that, but one of the major freeways I had to actually cross to get to this hotel. Not the freeway itself, but like the exit junction. I ended up having a kind of a second dinner, grabbed a beer and like a little appetizer action at a bar around the corner from here. And then sort of went back into the room and talked to my girlfriend, and here I am. It's crazy that I'm this close. It was funny that as I was just doing those extra miles, it was like, geez, I could almost even go all the way to Cincinnati. Now, granted, it's a lot further away. I don't think I had an extra 30 miles in me, but it was funny how the end of the day just sort of manifested itself this way. Really beautiful trail. I'm on the Little Miami River Trail. The river is gorgeous. I mentioned that the campsite was literally right on the river. The towns are really nice too. Apparently there's a few more really cool towns between here and downtown Cincinnati. It's going to be this kind of loop to the east, and then it kind of loops in and ends up getting to the south side of downtown Cincinnati. And so I've got a wonderful end of the ride ahead of me to wrap up not only the Ohio to Erie Trail, but my entire adventure. Best as I can figure, I've crossed 700 miles in the last few miles here. So that's kind of exciting. I haven't done this amount of miles in one tour since the 2014 Pacific Coast Tour. So, it's just fun to kind of like lay out the marker and hit the mark when you set your goals for tours and things like that. So I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to become a little bit more reflective on things, and I'll have a lot more to talk about as I summarize how this ride went when all is said and done. So, one more day to go. Very short day.
Good afternoon from Linwood, Ohio. That is right within a couple miles, I think, here of the Cincinnati border. I thought I would take a moment to do the morning edition here. We'll do a final edition, of course, as we, meaning me, cross into Cincinnati and wrap this puppy up. May 14th, the 14th day of riding. Mediocre hotel means mediocre hotel breakfast. I'll tell you what, I've never had more Raisin Bran in my life in one sitting. It was kind of amazing. I planned to get a little bit of a later start just because I wanted to take advantage of having a good night's sleep and all of that. And I didn't, in the end, leave until about 10 a.m., which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the latest that I've started on the entire trip. And it was good. It was totally worth it because so much stuff just doesn't open early enough. And I wanted to have an opportunity to hit at least one thing before I went into Cincinnati. And spoiler alert, I did. It's much sunnier and warmer today than the last few days. Last few days have been really kind of rough. It was just cold and damp, and, that just gets at you after a couple of days. I was fine. I had the gear for it. But, it's just nice to have a nice sunny day to kind of wrap this all up, especially on the trail that I've been on. I'll get to that in a moment. I was on the Little Miami River Trail, which has been getting a lot of great reviews from folks. And I agree, having done the stretch of it already here today. Paved, again, I don't know why I didn't know how much of this was paved, but it is, and it was pretty great. On the trail, I saw a woman riding a horse, and it was just interesting, kind of the juxtaposition of all of that as I was riding my horse, and, just thinking of the fact that my stallion, my steed, my mare, I don't know what gender my bike is, who knows, or no gender. It's 2019, man. It was just interesting to kind of juxtapose the idea of my horse got me over 700 miles at that point, and that was really all cool. As I got closer to Cincinnati, the waves and hellos that I had been accustomed to getting had been sort of going by the wayside, which is something I've noticed happens mostly in cities, and that is totally fine. As a city folk myself, we city folk aren't fazed by bikes with loaded gear, I suppose. I don't know. One other thing I noticed, and this Billy brought up yesterday, apparently this is a big area for trikes and recumbents. And man, I've never seen more trikes and recumbents in my life as on the Little Miami Trail. And I don't know if it's just there's a really good dealer nearby, or it's just one of those things that once you have a critical mass, more people get them. But tons of them. Oh, that's interesting. There's a biplane. I'm very close to not the main Cincinnati airport, which is in actually Kentucky on the other side of the river, but the municipal airport. So I'm right in the flight path of small planeage, like Richie Rich planes. But I digress. I hit, as I sort of alluded before, a brewery. Well, I didn't allude that it was a brewery. I was alluding that I wanted to get to something that wasn't going to be open until later. And I went to 50 West. There's a road route, which I do want to talk about in a moment here. And it just started where 50 West Brewing Company was. And the beer was good. Person who served me was great. And then there's sort of like this weird thing I've noticed, and I put up my hot take on Twitter. I don't know why, but every time I can tell if it's like an owner or a proprietor, they're always a little too cool for school, man. They're I don't know, gruff and huffy, and I don't know. I understand running a business, man. I do it myself, but come on, man. Crack a smile, be cool, whatever you need to do. But it was the beer was all right. I'm still rolling for Millersburg Brewing Company of all the ones that I've hit, but they had at least one very good IPA that I liked. And there was one sour, and then there was one sour that was just a little bit too weird for me. They put in electrolytes, which I thought, oh, great, I'm biking. That'll be really awesome. And it was basically a salty beer, and it was gross as fuck. So don't drink that one. It was like some watermelon thing. Ugh, gross. Anyways, otherwise, 50 West, I highly recommend it as a stop because it's very convenient, and it's before, oh, boy. Remember when I said that I was going to look back on that 520 route as the worst road route? I tell you, this road route here between the kind of trails, and I'm not even sure if I'm done with it yet, man, it is dicey. There are sidewalks, and I would definitely recommend you take them if you're not feeling comfortable, but the road quality is very low. I will say the drivers were very good and very responsive and got out of the way. Trucks too, and this is an industrial area, but this is not... doesn't feel done in this area, and I understand, again, you got to connect what you can do with your connections, but easily my least favorite part of this entire trip, and it was fine. I'm used to riding and stuff like that. I can do it, but it's such a contrast to how great the trails have been, and it's tough. I mean, you got to connect what you can connect. That's basically where I'm at right now, and as I mentioned, I'm by a golf course and an airport. I think I'm within 10 miles or less of the finish line here. So that's why I wanted to kind of wrap it all up kind of message at the end here. But beautiful blue sky, clouds in the sky. Looks like I'm going to be able to meet up with at least one or maybe even two people tonight for a little Cincinnati celebration. So that's exciting. I'm not even at the point right now where I'm accepting that this thing is close to being over. So hopefully I'll have some words for it at the end here. But in any event, day 14, man, we're more than half over. More than half over. We'll talk to you at the finish line. From Cincinnati, Ohio, at the base of the Riebling Suspension Bridge and the banks of the Ohio River, I am done. 726 miles is my best guess. It's probably a little bit more than that. interesting ride coming in. So I meet a really cool guy named Justin within minutes of my last recording, and he was asking questions, and we were chatting, and he's like, "Oh, I'm heading to this other brewery," and I'm like, "Okay, sounds good." So we ended up at another brewery, and so just talked about bikes and all sorts of other stuff, and really enjoyed that. And he was like, "Okay, well, I'm heading downtown, so I'll just sort of guide you there." So I had a guide, a local guy, who was able to get me through a kind of a gnarly construction zone. It wasn't too bad. It's definitely, you can tell it's going to be awesome when it's all done, bike lanes and everything. But it was really nice to you could first see the Ohio River because you were right on the banks of that, and then you could see the skyline of Cincinnati. It was just kind of the perfect introduction to the end of the ride. But it is really interesting. Cincinnati just sort of appears out of nowhere. It's really interesting, and it's a very beautiful city here in this downtown area. I've been told that the downtown Cincinnati area isn't as fun or as interesting unless you go up to, would it be north of here? It might be north of here, or go on the Kentucky side to, I believe that's Covington, Kentucky, that I'm looking at on the other side of the banks there. But for the first time in 2 weeks, going, so what next? Well, actually, I do know what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go to the train station. I'm going to see what I can do about maybe figuring out what the situation will be for this evening, for tonight, for getting the bags settled away. It would be nice if I could be, as I mentioned on prior podcasts, basically just my bike and my lock, and to be a little bit more chill. Other interesting thing, there were exposed rail tracks, and I was telling Justin before he turned off to go off to his place, told him about how in Seattle last December I took a nasty spill. Within maybe 120 seconds after he turns off, I pull a stupid stunt and go at the tracks at an angle less than 90 degrees, probably less than 45 degrees, let's be honest, and took a nasty spill. It was funny. I knew it was happening when it was happening, and so I did kind of a good stuntman roll. I really wish I could have seen that on video because I might be a little bit impressed about how I managed to pull it off. Did manage to nick up my knee. Might have ruined these pants, at least I may have to at least mend them or do something about them. There's a little teeny gash there, but considering what happened, not so bad. Bike's fine. But a good introduction to the city of Cincinnati by taking a spill. Normally at this stage, I have something witty or interesting to say about the sense of the adventure or anything like that. And I have to say, folks, I got nothing right now. I'm really always grateful that I can declare an endpoint to a tour and get to that point, and especially one that was as long as this and was kind of as momentous as this, to be able to do 3 complete through rides of 3 of the great trails of the country east of the Mississippi. It just feels like such a fun accomplishment, and I'm just really, I got fans. They're cheering for me. It feels like such a fun accomplishment to do. And it's also fun to look at this as the possibility of a piece of a cross-country ride and all of those types of things. But more than anything else, it was just kind of nice to have met all the people along the way. And unfortunately, I have bike touring brain right now, and I'm not even going to try, but I will in a proper conclusion that I do in post, talk about all of the different people who were met up with me, either had a bite to eat or put me up or whatever. It just was really fun to meet folks along the way, and also to connect up all these different parts of these great cities and do it by bike. It's pretty awesome. So with that really underwhelming conclusion out of the way, I have some work to do here to kind of figure out how to get home. So that's what I'm going to do. I hope everybody's having a great time wherever you are. I hope you had fun listening. I hope you had a fraction of as much of a good time as I had bicycling all this nonsense. More to come. All I have to say about the end of this tour is, what's next?
As I mentioned while I was there in Cincinnati at the end of the ride, I wanted to take the opportunity to give a big thank you to a variety of the folks that I met along on the ride. And some of these folks I just kind of met and said hello to. Other of these folks did a lot more than just help me out. And I'm just going to start off with Lisa Hart. Thank you so much for putting me up and for portaging me around that crazy section in Summit County there. Summit County? I think it was Summit County. Anyways, thank you, Lisa. Wanted to thank the Michigan guys for meeting up. That was awesome and a lot of fun. Of course, that was the precursor to my awesome stealth camp night. Thanks so much for meeting up again. Tom and everybody in the Mount Vernon group, there was a whole gaggle of you. It was really fun to meet you all there on the trail. Doug and Michelle, of course, for skirting me around the Columbus area and talking bikes all over the place. Chris Barron, likewise. It was so nice to meet you. Billy, Justin, Brian, everybody who I met on the southern part of the ride, just had a great time. Thanks so much for meeting up and for hanging out. And Billy times two, because we met up a couple of times there. It was really awesome. It was really great to cross paths. Thank you all. Statistics. Miles biked 130, hotel nights 1, campsites 1, flats 0, planned meetups 1, unplanned meetups 2, mechanicals 0, breweries visited 2, bars visited 1, well, probably more than that, but we'll just go with 1, beers many, stories of creepy dude at the Amtrak station not making it on this show 1. And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows, bonus podcasts, and tour journals. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. There's one-shot and annual options if you're not into the small monthly thing. Check it all out, pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lane, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Didis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadas, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Stuart Bucket, Todd Stutz, Mr. T, Roxy Arning, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince Lacreco, Paul Culbertson, Scott Culbertson, Cody Flortinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Richard Patch, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Dave Roll, Joseph Quinn, Susan Brewster, Drew Porter, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robert, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gebhardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemas, Connie Moore, William Gothman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, and new to the society, Greg Letoile Lopez. And thanks to all past and anonymous contributors for making the show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.